We all agreed. You're not welcome at your dad's retirement celebration, my stepmother said with a smile. Good to know. I replied, moved the $6,000 Europe trip fund back to my account, and canceled everything I planned. By morning, 17 missed calls, and one message from my stepbrother that changed everything. Celebration terminated. They say planning a surprise is the fun part. That might be true, if no one tries to tear it down before you can even show it. My name's Marcus. I'm 38 years old, and I live in Chicago. I'm an architect, the kind who spends way too much time obsessing over bricks and cornices and symmetry most people never notice. But this time, my focus wasn't on skyscrapers or zoning codes. It was on my dad. Walter, 68. Retired high school principal. Quiet. A little stiff in the way that says disciplinarian, but underneath it, I always sensed something else. Maybe a man who wished he'd chosen differently. Maybe one who'd hidden a more curious, adventurous version of himself just to be the guy everyone needed. I had a plan, and it was good. For months, I'd been organizing a European rail trip for him. Italy, Spain, Germany, all of it tailored to historic architecture. I remembered something he said once, years ago, when we were watching a documentary on Roman aqueducts. I'd love to see that in person one day. Most people forget passing comments like that. I don't. So I set up a family fund in his name. Looked like a group effort. But it was me, all me. Every bonus, every overtime hour I could squeeze in. I booked sleeper trains and heritage hotels and hired a private guide for Rome who was also a retired archaeologist. I even worked with one of his old students to make a custom-bound scrapbook full of messages from colleagues, students, and friends. Every photo, every handwritten note, a tribute to the life he lived. The farewell party was supposed to be the cherry on top. I rented out the community hall where he'd once chaperoned dances. The theme? A life of legacy. And it was going to be beautiful. That's when Helen and Craig started meddling. Helen is my stepmother, married dad when I was 16. Polished, graceful, speaks in that smooth tone that makes you feel like a child asking silly questions. Craig's her son, 29. Personal trainer with a podcast about discipline and intermittent fasting. They'd smiled when I told them about the trip, nodded politely at my color-coded folders. But things started shifting. First, Helen sent me a casual text about possibly making the party more versatile and less intellectually niche. Then Craig forwarded me a Pinterest board titled Fun Cruise Themes for Seniors. I ignored it. I should have responded. I didn't. A week later, the catering company emailed me they'd received a cancellation request from Helen. She wanted to go in a more festive direction. Then the printer called. The scrapbook? Canceled. Said a woman named Helen had explained it was no longer needed, that the guest of honor wouldn't appreciate that kind of sentimentality. I felt my throat tighten. It was Craig who really cracked it open. I found out there was a private family group chat called Walt's Retirement Spectacular. I wasn't in it. The only reason I found out was because my cousin accidentally replied all. I confronted Craig that night. Why would you make a separate group? I asked. He shrugged like it was nothing. We just figured it'd be easier to plan stuff without so many extra voices. Keeps things smooth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table between us. Instead, I nodded, walked out of the room, drove home in silence. That was when I realized they were rewriting the story, the ending I had poured my soul into. And they were doing it behind my back, one substitution at a time. And worst of all, Dad didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. A few days after the group chat incident, I sat in Helen and Walter's living room, sipping cold coffee from a mug that said, World's Best Principal. It used to sit on his desk at school. Now it was a relic on a shelf no one dusted. Helen sat across from me, legs crossed at the ankle like she was leading a PTA meeting. Craig leaned against the doorway, arms folded, trying hard to look casual. He failed. I just think, Helen said gently, we need to be realistic. About what? I asked, though I already knew. This trip, she said, gesturing vaguely. Europe. Ruins. Ancient buildings. It's very cerebral. I raised an eyebrow. That's kind of the point. But Walter's retiring, she continued, tone never shifting. He doesn't want to spend his days dragging luggage through cobblestone streets. He needs something rejuvenating, relaxing. Like a cruise, Craig chimed in, as if reading off a script. You know, buffet breakfasts, live music, tropical views. Something chill. I glanced toward the hallway, wondering if Dad could hear us. He's never once mentioned wanting a cruise. Craig smirked. Well, he never asked for ruins either. I set my mug down slowly. He mentioned the Roman aqueducts to me, and I designed the whole itinerary around sites he taught about for decades. Helen nodded politely, like I was giving a book report. But darling, that was years ago. People change. He's older now. We have to think about his comfort. The words hit like a slap. Older. Fragile. Like he was already fading. That evening, I went home and checked the scrapbook status. Cancelled. I called the print shop. They confirmed Helen's name was on the cancellation order. She'd also called the caterer again. The Mediterranean-themed menu I'd chosen was now swapped out for a general American favorites spread, sliders, cheese cubes, and some kind of build-your-own sundae bar. Walter's lactose intolerant. And the guest list? I opened the shared spreadsheet I had made. Gone. Deleted. I had spent hours collecting names, writing little notes next to each. Coached basketball with him in '89, mentored Marcus in drafting class, taught choir when Dad chaperoned the trip to D.C. All gone. I scrolled through my texts, heart racing, and there it was, a new message from an aunt. So excited about Walt's cruise party. Helen's really pulling it all together. Cruise party? I slammed my laptop shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how this whole thing had slipped away from me. I had done everything right. Every detail. Every dollar. I pulled up the group chat Craig had created, the one I wasn't supposed to see. Messages poured in. Balloon arches or tropical centerpieces? Thinking steel drums during dinner? Marcus is still on about the train trip, LOL. I shut my phone off. The next morning, I drove to Dad's house. He was in the garden, trimming dead branches off a shrub that hadn't bloomed in years. I stood there, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He looked up, offered a weak smile. Morning, son. I nodded, but inside, I felt it, the first crack. The beginning of something breaking. The following Sunday, Helen invited me to what she called a planning huddle. Just a few people, she said. Informal. Nothing serious. I knew something was off the second I walked in. The living room had been rearranged with folding chairs, snacks laid out in plastic trays, and a whiteboard that read, Walt's big day, final countdown. At least 15 people were there, all sipping punch and flipping through brochures for cruise excursions. Not a single mention of Italy, or trains, or Roman ruins. I stood there for a beat, unsure if I was supposed to sit or just keep holding the deviled eggs I brought. Helen spotted me and waved me over, beaming like a proud host. Marcus. Great. We were just about to assign roles. She gestured to the board, where tasks were listed under categories like tropical theme, photo booth, and deck games. You'll be in charge of setup, she said cheerfully. We need someone strong to help Craig with the banners and load the party supplies into the van. I blinked. Setup? She smiled like I was being difficult. Yes, honey. It'll be such a help. I glanced around the room. Everyone else had been given real tasks. Speech writing, playlist coordination, centerpiece design. I was the muscle. The guy lifting boxes. I cleared my throat. Actually, I planned. But Craig cut in. We've got it covered, man. You've done plenty. Just chill and help us execute. Execute. Like I was some intern being patted on the head. I tried to speak again, but Helen's voice cut through. Okay, so let's go over the guest welcome gifts. Craig and I picked out some adorable monogram towels. My dad sat in the corner. Quiet. Just watching. Not smiling, not frowning. Just there. I caught his eye. Gave a small wave. He gave me a nod. That was it. Not a word. Not a question about the European trip. Not even a mention of the scrapbook. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't asked where my ideas went. I stood there another 10 minutes, then quietly slipped out. No one noticed. Not even him. Back home, I opened my laptop and stared at the trip itinerary. All 12 days. Rome to Florence to Paris to Barcelona. Rail passes. Hotel bookings. The private tour of the Colosseum. I moved the folder to the trash. Then hovered. Then stopped. Instead, I opened the family fund account. I looked at the balance. Just over $6,000. All from my own savings. I hovered over the transfer funds button. And then I clicked it. Back into my personal account. No announcement. No text. No warning. The Europe trip? Cancelled. Every ticket. Every hotel. Every tour. I made the calls one by one, voice calm, heart heavy. By midnight, it was done. I sat in the dark, alone in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea I didn't want. My phone buzzed with a message from Helen. Can you grab paper towels before next Sunday's meeting? I didn't reply. Somewhere deep inside, a switch had flipped. I wasn't part of this anymore. They had erased me. So I returned the favor. Quietly. Precisely. Just like an architect does when the foundation cracks. You start over. Or you let it fall. The first message came at 7:13 a.m. sharp, like Helen had it scheduled. Helen, Marcus, what happened to the reservations? I just got an alert from the cruise line. Please clarify. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another one, this time from Craig. Craig, dude, did you cancel the trip? Seriously? That's not okay. My phone buzzed so much I had to switch it to silent. Text kept rolling in. Helen, I'm getting calls from vendors. You need to fix this now. Craig, this is sabotage, man. You're screwing over Dad's retirement. Helen, you're being petty. After all we've done for this party? Really? That one made me laugh, bitterly. Done for the party? They'd gutted the whole thing. Scraped away every piece I'd built until all that was left was confetti and deck chairs. I scrolled past the noise, looking for one name. Finally, it came. Walter. We need to talk. Just that. A voicemail. 20 seconds long. His voice quiet, like always. Marcus. I heard about the cancellations. I think we need to talk. When you're ready. No anger. No confusion. Just that mild resignation he wore like a suit. I could hear the creak of his old recliner in the background. I imagined him sitting there with his hands folded, waiting for someone to tell him what came next. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much. Because if I called him back, I might say everything I'd buried for the last 20 years. I might ask him why he never protected me from the way Helen erased me piece by piece. I might ask if he ever really wanted to go to Europe, or if I just invented the version of him I wished he could be. Instead, I stared at the ceiling for hours. Thought about the train rides that would never happen. About the photo I'd planned to take of him standing beneath the Roman aqueducts. Then came a new text. Craig. I was wrong. We need to meet. There's something you need to see. And just like that, the silence broke. But it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a door creaking open to something even darker. We met at a sterile little cafe downtown. Glass walls, gray booths, the kind of place business people go to pretend they aren't lonely. Craig sat near the back, alone, stirring coffee he hadn't touched. No protein shake, no earbuds in. Just him, jittery and unshaven. I slid into the booth across from him. He didn't say anything at first. Just pushed a manila folder across the table toward me. I stared at it. You said you had something to show me, I said. He nodded, eyes on his cup. You'll want to look inside. I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies, dozens of them. Yellowed letters, bank statements, and scribbled notes. At the top of the pile, an envelope addressed to Walter. Postmarked 1997. I froze. That's from your mom, Craig said, voice quiet. Your real mom. I looked up, throat tight. Where did you get this? Helen kept it in her locked cabinet in the upstairs hallway. I was looking for paper towels, of all things. He laughed bitterly. Found a key taped to the bottom drawer. Thought it was nothing. I pulled out the letter. My mother's handwriting, uneven but unmistakable. I hadn't seen it in years. Not since I was 11. The letter was short. Apologetic. She'd written it from a rehab center. Said she was getting help. Said she missed me. Said she wanted to see me, even if it was just once. It was never delivered. I found 5 more, Craig said. All addressed to your dad. All unopened. I flipped through them. Every one had the same quiet ache. She was trying. Reaching out. And Helen had stuffed them away like junk mail. Craig shifted in his seat. It gets worse. He handed me a small stack of financial papers, trust fund statements. I scanned the headers. My name. My mother's name. She left a fund for you, Craig said. Not a huge one, but enough. College, travel, whatever you wanted. It was in your name, with Walter as custodian until you turned 21. I blinked, heart hammering. I never saw any of this. She liquidated part of it when you were 17, he continued, shame on his face. Said it was for a family emergency. Then again when you were 20. Said you refused it. Said you wanted nothing to do with your mother. I looked at him. She lied. He nodded. I didn't know until last week. I always thought you were the uptight one. Controlling. Thought you made everything harder than it needed to be. But I started reading these and... Marcus, she's been manipulating all of us for years. I leaned back, dazed. Craig went on. She made sure your dad depended on her financially, emotionally. She kept him passive. Told him it was better to let her handle things. And he did. He let her. I didn't speak. My hand shook too much to hold the coffee cup. Craig finally looked up. I know I helped her mess up the party. I know I pushed the cruise. I thought I was smoothing things out, making it easier for Dad. But really, I was helping her erase you. He paused, voice cracking. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. I swear to God. For a long time, I said nothing. The city buzzed outside the cafe window. People walked past like nothing had changed. But everything had. My mother hadn't abandoned me. My father hadn't failed to care. The truth was far simpler. And crueler. Helen had cut the wires. And then watched me fall. We met in the sunroom, the one Helen always insisted on calling the conservatory, even though it just overlooked the neighbor's fence and a half-dead hydrangea bush. It was mid-afternoon. The light came through the blinds in pale slats, casting lines across the carpet. No one touched the lemonade on the tray. Walter sat on the love seat, shoulders curled and like a man waiting for impact. Craig stood near the door. Helen, radiant in her favorite navy cardigan, had her legs crossed and her smile fixed, polite, performative, sharp around the edges. I set the folder on the coffee table. Helen's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Well, this looks serious. It is, I said. I kept my voice level. You might want to start by reading the letters. She reached for them with manicured fingers like they were coupons. Craig didn't move. Walter just stared at the carpet. Helen opened the first envelope. Read 2 lines. Froze. I watched her carefully, waiting for the reaction. It came slower than I expected. This, she said, barely above a whisper. This is old. Why would you dredge this up now? Because it was never yours to hide, I said. Walter shifted in his seat, looked at her. Helen? What is that? She didn't answer. Letters, I said. From my mother. Sent to you. Addressed to you. You never showed them to him. Walter's eyes flicked from me to Helen, then to the paper trembling slightly in her hand. That's not true, she said quickly, voice rising. I told you about one. Years ago. Craig spoke up for the first time. You told me she didn't write. That she gave up. Helen glared at him like he was a traitor. You're both being ridiculous. This isn't some mystery novel. She was unstable. You don't know what she was capable of. No, I cut in. What you were capable of was making sure no one else got to decide what she was. You did that. You stole the last words she ever tried to give me. I slid the trust statements across the table. Walter leaned forward now, squinting at the numbers. That's the fund she left me, I said. You were supposed to hold it in trust. But someone withdrew from it. Helen's mask cracked. She stood. This is absurd. You're making me into some kind of villain. For what? Because I tried to give you all a normal life? Walter held up a trembling hand. Helen, is this true? She went silent. You told me he wanted nothing from her, he continued. That he refused the money. That he was bitter. I was protecting you, she cried. He was better off without that woman's poison. And you just sat there while she fell apart. I did everything I could to keep this house standing. Walter looked down at the papers again. His voice was quiet. You didn't protect me. You managed me. Helen took a step toward him. I kept this family together. At what cost? I said. Walter reached for one of the letters. Read it in silence. His fingers traced the edge of the paper like he was afraid it might dissolve. Then he looked at me. Really looked. And for once, I didn't see the principal. I didn't see the man who let other people speak over him. I saw a father trying to find the words too late. I should have known, he said softly. I should have asked. I nodded once. That was enough. For now. Helen's voice shook. You're both making a huge mistake. No, Craig said. We're just finally paying attention. Helen tried to regain control the moment it slipped. Her voice sharpened, rising above us like a fire alarm. This is character assassination, she hissed. You're twisting everything. I held this family together. Without me, it would have fallen apart years ago. Walter didn't look at her. That might have hurt her more than anything. You think this is easy for me? She snapped. Managing bills, keeping track of appointments, making sure you didn't spiral every time something went wrong? Craig stood near the wall, jaw tight. It wasn't managing. You made it so no one else had a say. She whirled toward him. Don't lecture me. I did what I had to do. Did you have to lie? He asked. Did you have to hide letters from a kid's dying mother? Silence. Then Walter spoke, not loud, but firm. Was any of it ever real, Helen? Her face crumpled for a moment, then hardened again. How dare you, she whispered. After everything I've done for you. Walter stood slowly. No anger. No shouting. Just a man who'd finally woken up and found the house he lived in wasn't his own. I need time, he said, almost to himself. I need to figure out what's left. Helen scoffed. Don't be dramatic. But he wasn't listening anymore. He was already pulling open the drawer by the side table, grabbing his keys, his wallet, a slim folder marked medical. Craig stepped aside so he could pass. You leaving? Walter paused in the doorway. Just for a while. Helen stood frozen, lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out. Walter looked back once, at both of us. I'm going to see a therapist, he said. It's time I started understanding how all this happened. Then he left. The door clicked shut behind him. That soft little sound felt louder than any slam. Helen stood there, trembling. This is your fault, she whispered to me. You turned him against me. I picked up the last remaining copy of my mother's letter. No, you did that yourself. I just turned on the lights. By the end of the week, the cruise was officially canceled. Helen tried to salvage it, but without Walter, and without the money I'd taken back, no one else wanted in. The guest list shrunk. The excitement died. And Helen? She stayed behind in the house she used to rule. Alone. Her fury was still there, but the performance had collapsed. No audience left. Craig and I left in silence that day. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew something permanent had shifted. And for the first time, it wasn't Helen calling the shots. Craig showed up at my apartment a week later with 2 things, a box of old family photos and a 6-pack of root beer. Not craft beer. Not IPAs. Just plain, cheap root beer like we drank when we were kids and thought it was adult. He stood at the door awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. I figured maybe it was time to, I don't know, not pretend we hate each other. I stepped aside. About time. We spent the next few hours on the floor of my living room, flipping through curled-edge Polaroids and grainy 2000s era prints. There we were, two gangly kids in 4th of July t-shirts, sitting on the back porch with popsicles and grass-stained knees. Craig held up one picture of all of us at a pumpkin patch. You remember this? You tried to build a scarecrow and ended up making something that looked like a sleep-deprived clown. I laughed. That thing haunted my dreams for a year. He smiled, then got quiet. I wish I'd asked more questions, man. About your mom. About what Helen was doing. I just went along with it. She made it so easy not to look too close. You're looking now, I said. That's what matters. He nodded, eyes glossy. I started therapy last week. Good. Dad's going too. Says he wants to unpack some things. He mimicked Walter's voice, deep and careful. We both laughed. It felt real this time. Not stiff. Not forced. Later that week, Walter called me. Not to talk about Helen. Not to apologize. Just to ask if I'd come by for dinner. I'd like to cook something from that Italian cookbook you gave me, he said. Might not taste like Rome, but I figure it's a start. I said yes. That same day, a legal envelope arrived at my door. Inside was confirmation. My mother's trust had been partially restored. The remaining amount wasn't huge, just under $9,000, but it was something. Not the money, really. The truth of it. That it had been there all along, intended for me. A tether to a woman who hadn't stopped loving me, only been silenced. I deposited the check, not because I needed it, but because it felt like the final brick falling back into place. Craig and I helped Walter move into a new apartment a few weeks later, modest, clean, full of light. No Helen. No curated walls. Just him, his books, and the stack of old letters he was finally reading. At one point, Craig turned to me, wiping sweat from his forehead. Feels weird, doesn't it? What? Doing things right. With no script. I thought about it, then smiled. Yeah, but weird's better than fake. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. Not to a version of a family, but to the real one we were just starting to build. The train wound through the forest like it knew where I needed to go, away from everything, towards something quieter. Something mine. I rented the cabin in the Bavarian Alps after reading about it in an architecture journal. It wasn't flashy. Just wood and stone tucked against a ridgeline, surrounded by pine and mist. The kind of place that asked nothing of you except that you listen to your own breathing. When I arrived, I stood on the porch for a long time, just staring. No buzz of city traffic. No phone vibrating with other people's expectations. Just the wind threading through the trees like a language I used to know. Inside, it smelled like pine and clean sheets. The wood stove worked. The coffee pot didn't. I didn't care. I spent the first few days hiking in worn boots, feeling the crunch of old leaves underfoot. I didn't track my steps. I didn't check email. I just walked, sometimes until dusk, letting my thoughts stretch like muscles after a long sleep. Each night, I journaled. Not about what had happened. Not yet. Just pieces of it. A sentence at a time. Words like control, erasure, silence, choice. Then later, softer ones. Truth, letter, permission, release. One morning, I unpacked a photo. Just one. It was taken when I was 8, me and my mom sitting on a park bench. Her hand was on my shoulder. We both had the same squint in the sun kind of smile. I placed it beside the stone hearth. No frame. Just leaning. She didn't get to see me grow up. Helen stole that. But she got to see who I started to become. And that counted for something. One night by the fire, I wrote Walter a letter. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't apologize. I didn't demand anything. I wrote, if you want to meet again, as two men without roles, I'm open to that. No script. Just you and me. I folded it once and slid it into an envelope. I didn't send it right away. I let it sit on the table for 2 days, until it stopped feeling like a risk and started feeling like a truth. My last night there, I sat outside with a blanket around my shoulders and the smell of wood smoke in my nose. The stars looked different. Older. Less urgent. I didn't feel lonely. I felt chosen. By myself. There's a difference between being alone and being abandoned. This wasn't the absence of people. This was the presence of peace. When I left the next morning, I took one last look at the cabin. And I whispered, not to anyone, just to the space. This time, I get to write the ending. And maybe, the beginning too. The knock came at dusk. I had just finished frying trout I caught that morning, the cabin filled with the smell of butter and rosemary. For a second, I thought maybe it was the wind, a branch, an echo. But when I opened the door, Walter stood there. Behind him, Craig fumbled with a hiking backpack, trying to look casual. I hope we're not too early, Walter said. I stepped aside. You're just in time. We didn't hug. We didn't make speeches. Walter handed me a bottle of some local schnapps he'd picked up in town, and Craig dropped a duffel bag with a thud and a grimace. We cooked quietly. Ate even quieter. The cabin didn't feel crowded, just full. Later, we sat outside. The three of us lined up like mismatched chess pieces in folding chairs. No one rushed to fill the silence. We let it hang. Craig broke it first. Did you know I thought you were the stuck-up one for years? He said. Turns out I was just scared of having no opinion without Mom feeding it to me. I smirked. Yeah, I got that. Walter chuckled, a small, tired sound. Your mother, Helen, she made everything easier. Until it wasn't. We didn't rehash everything. We didn't need to. It wasn't about reviewing the damage. It was about standing among the wreckage and deciding to build something better. They stayed 2 nights. We fished in silence. Hiked a short trail Craig claimed was definitely not uphill, which was a lie. We played cards and argued over rules like people who remembered how. On the last night, Craig looked through one of my sketchbooks and pointed at a drawing of a small, single-room cabin design. You thinking of building that? I shrugged. Maybe someday. Walter leaned in to look. I'd visit. That was enough. When they left, we didn't hug. But Craig clapped my shoulder before walking out the door. Walter lingered. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It's not much, he said. But I wrote back. After they were gone, I read it by the fire. No apologies. No defenses. Just a quiet recognition of time lost. And a hope that maybe, just maybe, we could salvage what was left. A week later, I was invited to speak on a podcast hosted by an old college friend. The topic was family reckonings. I almost said no. But then I thought, why not? I told the story. Not in anger. Not with revenge. Just with honesty. At the end of the episode, the host asked, if you could ask our listeners one question, what would it be? I paused, then said, what illusions have you had to break to finally find your own truth? The quiet after that felt bigger than any applause. And that's the thing about stories. You don't always get to rewrite the beginning. But sometimes, you do get to choose the final chapter. And this one was mine.